Hello. As some of you might already know, I've recently switched all of my kit lenses over to Sony E-mount. And I'm starting to use this little A7 III as my B camera to the FX9, the one that you're looking through now. And I'm getting used to the A7 III, apart from the unique, overly complicated Sony menu system. But the big question is, can you get anywhere near to a close picture match between the A7 III and a £10,000 FX9? You think it'd be straightforward. I mean, they're both Sony full-frame sensors and they've got similar sounding profile names. I mean, how difficult can it be? Ta-da! So the obvious answer is just shoot S-Log3 on both cameras. And that will work to a degree, but there are two main problems. Firstly, I've now got a lot of clients who really like the Cinetone profile off the FX9. It's not just the picture quality, which is lovely, it's more a case of they don't want to do a full grade in post. They want to use the pictures straight off the camera. But a much bigger problem, and a bit of a deal breaker for S-Log3, is the fact that the A7S only shoots 420 8-bit. And that's not enough data, it's not enough wiggle room for you to do a proper grade. So what I need is a look that looks a bit like Cinetone, but on the A7 III. Something that needs more of a tweak rather than a grade. Now I know that some of you are professional camera guys, maybe even DOPs, and you know exactly why S-Log3 doesn't work on 8-bit. Now, I don't want to waste your time teaching Granny. You're here because all you want to do is tap the settings into your A7 III. Well, just jump to this timecode and you can skip all the boring basic stuff. You're welcome. I'll see you there. Just between you and me, I'm actually glad they've gone. Nobody likes a know-it-all. For the rest of us, let's do a quick recap and go back to basics. In the simplest terms, a camera sensor just measures the amount of light hitting each individual photosite. It knows nothing about the colour of that light, just the number of photons landing in each square in the time it takes to capture one frame. What we all see as colour comes from putting little filters in front of each photosite, a colour array if you like. We're still just recording the luminance on the sensor, but now it's the luminance of filtered red, green or blue light. The important thing to realise here is we're still not recording any colour information. So the pattern of those colour filters is important, and most cameras use the Bayer pattern, named after a clever bloke called Bryce Bayer, who used to work for Kodak. Now that we know the pattern, it's easy to produce a colour picture later, just by knowing where those little filters were. But the key point here is that although we're still just recording luminance values on the sensor, the consistency and the colour quality of those filters has a huge effect in determining the colour of our final image. And those filters are not cheap or easy to produce. There are about twice as many green filters as there are red or blue. What this means is we've lost about a third of the colour resolution from the original sensor. So for a perfect 4K picture, you need to downsample from something like a 6K sensor, which is the way we've been heading for the last few years. And the fact that these cameras all have different CFAs is a major part of why it's difficult to get a perfect colour match, even with sensors from the same manufacturer using the same colour profiles. Now obviously, a colour image isn't just made up of red, green and blue. And for the sake of simplicity, I've been ignoring a lot of really important things like interpolation, where we average the colour of adjoining pixels to derive new shades of RGB. But all of these things are done in firmware, and presumably much easier to recreate in post. This whole process of recreating a colour picture later, just from luminance values behind a colour filter array, is called demosaicing. And it's either done in camera, if you want a usable picture straight away, or increasingly in post, if you'd rather shoot raw for more picture control later. But the problem is, we've now got way too much data. Think of a 4K video running at, say, 50 frames per second. That's over 8 million values per frame, or 414 million values per second. And clearly this is way too much data to deal with. We need to throw some of that data away, compress it. Hopefully the stuff we're not going to notice too much. And there are two big ways we can achieve this. The first one is called colour subsampling. Imagine little blocks of 4x2 pixels repeating right across your image. Now our eyes are much more sensitive to brightness than they are to colour, but we can throw away quite a bit of colour information without noticing too much. When you hear the phrase 444 or 422, the first number 4 at the top here is the number of pixels we're sampling across. The second number 4, top right, is the number of different colour samples on the first row. And the third number is the number of different samples on the second row when compared to the row above. So here we've got 444, which means every pixel has its colour sampled, which is full colour resolution. So following the same pattern, 422 means that the first row only has 2 out of 4 pixels of colour or chroma information. And the second row also has 2 out of 4. So you've divided the horizontal colour resolution by 2, but you've still got full vertical resolution. Now with 420, the first row has 2 out of 4 as before, but the second row has 0 or none. So it basically repeats the row above. So what you've done here is divide both the horizontal colour resolution by half and the vertical resolution by half. Now throwing away all that colour information does save us a lot of data, but the other big way is with bit depth. A bit is just a 1 or a 0, on or off, of binary data. So 8 bits can represent everything between 8 zeros and 8 ones, or 0 to 256 in decimal terms. So with 8-bit video, you can record 0 to 256 levels of brightness for red, 256 for blue, and 256 for green. Multiply all those together, and that means we can represent about 16.7 million colours or shades just using 8 bits. That sounds like a lot until you look at 10 bits. 10 bits gives us 10 zeros to 10 ones, or in decimal terms, 0 to 1024, which is 1024 levels of brightness for red, green and blue. In other words, over 1 billion different shades of colour. So when we say we're recording something in 422 10-bit, you can see that we've reduced the horizontal colour resolution by a half, but we're still recording over 1,000 million colours. You can also see that when you record 4208 bit, like on this Sony A7iii, that doesn't give us enough data, enough wiggle room to properly grade S-Log3. Speaking personally, I'd always prefer bit depth over subsampling. I'd rather have 420 10-bit than 422 8-bit. And this is the way the Panasonic S1H records 6K. After you've downsampled, the 420 looks better than the 422 just because it's 10-bit. Take a look at these two identical shots, both in S-Log3, one on the 10-bit FX9 and the other one on the 8-bit A7iii. If we push the grade to ridiculous levels, you can see that the 8-bit falls apart with horrendous banding really quickly. And while the 10-bit still looks stupid with this grade, you can zoom in and see that it doesn't fall apart in the same way, because we've got more shades of each colour. Which is why we're all desperately waiting for a 10-bit mirrorless camera from Sony. They need to do one soon. You could call it the A7S Mark III. But working with what we've got now, what I did was record a test scene with controlled lighting and the FX9 using Cinetone. I then set up the same scene with the A7iii using exactly the same lens and checking the white balance. You'll often get completely different white balance readings off two identical cameras, but that's another story. Just make sure you do a white balance on the same piece of card on both cameras and make a note of what that difference is. I then played the FX9 footage through Scopebox. It's a great program, by the way, and much more accurate than most editors. I grabbed screenshots of all the settings. Then I used a live picture from the A7iii and adjusted that camera live to match the FX9. This is a long and tedious process with quite a bit of trial and error, but eventually you can get quite close. You'll never get an exact match for all those colour filter array reasons I bored you with earlier. Now at this point we really should wait for all those know-it-alls to finish spooling through all the technical stuff. Don't say anything. Hello, welcome back. You haven't missed much. So after various tests, these are the settings I use on my A7 III to get a close match to the FX9 using Cinetone. I use Picture Profile 10, but you can use whichever one you prefer. I set the black level to -10, gamma Cine 2, black gamma, middle range, level -7. The knee I put into manual mode 100% with a slope of 0, colour mode still and saturation 0, colour phase -1, and the colour depth I changed the following settings: red +2, green +1, blue -1, cyan 0, magenta +1, and yellow 0. The detail level was -7. So after putting in those settings into my A7 III and doing a lot of real-world tests, even using it on some paid jobs, I find that the colours match really well between this and the FX9 using Cinetone. But do let me know if these settings work for you, or even if they don't. One thing to note, you need to do a white balance before every shoot, ideally on the same subject, because these cameras seem to record the white balances quite differently. This A7 III is consistently 300 degrees Kelvin out from the FX9, and if you just dial it in on the numbers, you're unlikely to get a good colour match. Also, if you've watched all the way through the technical back to basic stuff and you enjoyed it, do let me know, because I'll do more. And if you didn't enjoy it, do let me know, because I won't. Thanks for watching.